The hills of southern Lebanon are quiet, but the silence carries tension. Smoke still rises faintly from distant fields where shelling once echoed. It is a fragile calm, one that conceals deep uncertainty. Despite the ceasefire agreement that was supposed to end hostilities, Israeli troops remain stationed inside southern Lebanon. The world watches closely, and both sides brace for what might come next. The ceasefire, announced with cautious optimism, was meant to halt the violence that had raged for weeks between Israeli forces and Hezbollah fighters. Both sides agreed to stand down, allowing displaced civilians to return and humanitarian aid to reach devastated villages. But as the dust settled, it became clear that Israeli troops had not fully withdrawn. Reports from the border zone described convoys of armored vehicles still patrolling, drones hovering in the sky, and military outposts being reinforced rather than dismantled. For many Lebanese civilians, the promise of peace feels hollow. Villages once full of life remain scarred. Houses reduced to rubble, fields burned, and roads cratered. Farmers who return to their land do so cautiously, fearful of unexploded ordnance and of Israeli patrols that still cross the area. They said the war was over, one villager says, but when I hear the hum of drones above, I know it is not. The Israeli government, however, maintains that its presence in southern Lebanon is purely temporary and defensive. Officials argue that Hezbollah's infrastructure along the border poses a persistent threat, one that must be neutralized before any full withdrawal. Military spokespeople describe their forces as ensuring security and preventing future aggression. Yet critics, both in Lebanon and internationally, see this as an occupation in violation of the ceasefire terms. Hezbollah's response has been measured but defiant. Its leadership accuses Israel of bad faith, claiming that the continued military presence undermines the entire ceasefire agreement. For now, Hezbollah fighters remain largely out of sight, avoiding direct confrontation, but keeping watch from the shadows of the hills. The group's leaders have warned that if Israeli forces do not withdraw, resistance operations could resume. The region stands once again on the brink. UN observers stationed along the border find themselves in a difficult position. Their mandate is to monitor compliance and prevent escalation, but their access to certain areas remains restricted. Some peacekeepers describe seeing Israeli tanks within Lebanese territory, despite official denials. Their reports, often cautious in wording, paint a picture of a tense and volatile environment. Diplomatic efforts continue behind closed doors. The United Nations, the European Union, and the United States have all urged restraint, calling for full adherence to the ceasefire terms. Lebanese officials demand an immediate and unconditional withdrawal of Israeli troops, citing violations of international law. But within Israel, voices in the government insist that leaving too soon would invite renewed attacks from Hezbollah, arguing that security must come before diplomacy. Meanwhile, civilians on both sides of the border pay the price. In southern Lebanon, thousands of families remain displaced, their homes too damaged to return. Aid groups distribute food and medical supplies, but progress is slow. The infrastructure collapses. Power lines downed, bridges destroyed, and communication networks shattered, makes reconstruction nearly impossible. In northern Israel, residents near the border live under constant alert, fearful that another rocket barrage could begin at any moment. The psychological toll is immense. For people who have lived through multiple wars, the line between peace and war has blurred beyond recognition. Parents try to calm their children when distant booms echo across the valley, insisting that it's just thunder. Farmers plant their fields, knowing they could be uprooted again. Shopkeepers reopen their stores under the shadow of uncertainty, selling bread and batteries as though routine life can exist amid fragility. The international community faces its own dilemma. How to enforce a ceasefire when one side refuses to leave and the other threatens to retaliate. This situation has ignited debates about the role of UN peacekeeping missions, the limits of diplomacy, and the enduring instability of the Israeli-Lebanese border. Each time a ceasefire is declared, the pattern seems to repeat. Violence, negotiation, withdrawal, and then a slow drift back toward confrontation. In Beirut, government officials express frustration, saying Lebanon's sovereignty has once again been compromised. They appeal for global intervention, but international attention is divided. Conflicts elsewhere dominate headlines, and Lebanon's crisis risks fading into background noise. Yet for the people living in the borderlands, this is not a distant issue. It is their daily reality. Israeli analysts argue that the army's continued deployment is not an invasion but a safeguard, a buffer zone intended to prevent Hezbollah from rebuilding its positions near the border. Some military experts claim the ceasefire text was unintentionally ambiguous, allowing Israel to interpret its obligations loosely. Others disagree, warning that prolonged occupation could trigger a new round of conflict that neither side can afford. As weeks turn into months, the situation hardens. Israeli troops establish semi-permanent posts in areas that were supposed to be demilitarized. Lebanese villagers whisper that this feels like 1982 all over again, a reminder of Israel's long and painful occupation that lasted until 2000. The memories of that era still haunt Lebanon, shaping its politics and fueling mistrust. Hezbollah's leadership in public addresses warns that patience is not infinite. Speeches promise resistance, at a time of our choosing. Military analysts note increased movement among Hezbollah units north of the Litani River. Not an attack, but preparation. The message is clear: the longer Israel stays, the greater the risk of renewed war. Inside Israel, political debates flare. Opposition parties criticize the government for prolonging the deployment, accusing it of undermining diplomatic credibility. Supporters, however, defend the strategy as necessary for national defense. For Prime Minister Netanyahu's government, the issue has become a symbol of strength. Withdrawing too early might be seen as weakness. Staying too long could invite disaster. It is a balance of politics, pride, and fear. The border region becomes a stage for geopolitical chess. Iran, an ally of Hezbollah, condemns Israel's actions and pledges support for the resistance. The United States urges restraint but continues to back Israel's right to self-defense. Regional powers, including Turkey and Egypt, call for stability but remain cautious, wary of being drawn into another Middle Eastern escalation. Humanitarian workers warn of a growing crisis. Southern Lebanon's hospitals are overwhelmed, many operating without electricity or medicine. Aid convoys face delays due to security checkpoints. The Lebanese Red Cross reports rising cases of malnutrition among displaced children. International agencies call for urgent funding, but donor fatigue is setting in. The world, distracted by other conflicts, is slow to respond. Despite the grim outlook, moments of resilience shine through. Lebanese villagers rebuild homes with salvaged materials. Children play near broken walls, their laughter a fragile echo of normalcy. In one town, a local teacher reopens a school in a damaged building, teaching math and history amid cracked walls. Education, she says, is our quiet resistance. Across the border, Israeli families also long for stability. Some call for peace and withdrawal, tired of endless cycles of deployment and retaliation. Others, fearing Hezbollah's return, plead for continued military presence. It is a population divided between hope and anxiety, between the dream of peace and the fear of vulnerability. As the weeks go by, the world waits for resolution. Diplomats negotiate, armies watch, and civilians endure. The ceasefire exists on paper, but on the ground, it feels fragile, like glass under pressure. Every drone flight, every rumor of a skirmish, threatens to shatter it completely. Southern Lebanon remains a land between wars, caught in a dangerous limbo between promises and reality. For now, Israeli troops continue to hold their positions, and the people, both Lebanese and Israeli, continue to live under the shadow of uncertainty, hoping that this uneasy quiet will not once again give way to the sound of war.